I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design.
One is when we do the breath. So when we're consciously focusing on our breathing, we are thrusting ourselves into the present moment, right? You have to be in the present moment when you're breathing, because you can't take a breath in the past and you can't take a breath in the future. So you have to be in the present moment. And the present moment is essentially the quantum field, the field of infinite possibility. So the more that you're connecting in with the field of infinite possibility, the more that infinite possibilities are available to you.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I am so excited to share my guest with you today, Alyse Bacine, who is a breath work specialist expert, amongst so many other things, which I'm pretty sure we're going to dive into. So welcome, Alyse.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. Breath work is one of these things that I have never really got into, yet I have this huge curiosity about. I've had like one-on-one session with someone, which was great. Like, it shifted this emotion. I had this emotional response. It was really cool. And then I've done one of the apps that I use called Headspace, they have breath work. So I've done a few of those things, but I kind of want to dive into, and to be honest, I think the reason I don't do breath work is actually because on some level, I'm afraid of it. And I've often asked myself, like, what the hell is that all about? Like, what is that about? I mean, at some level, it's my ego going, don't do that because that's going to get rid of me. But I'm just curious, like, are many people like afraid of breath work or resistant to it?
So I've been practicing it for over 20 years now, probably about 22 years, and I'm still afraid of it. So
oh my God,
so
I love
it's
that.
like, so I feel like everyone
know.
is. Yeah. Well, it's confronting, it's very confronting because you're kind of forced to sit with yourself and confront what's present for you in a very real way. And it's scary, but it's interesting too, because I feel like once you actually do it, it's not scary. It's just more the idea of it, where it feels like, oh no, what am I going to have to face? What am I going to have to confront? I'd rather just stay comfortable right where I am.
Oh my God, I love that. And it's really funny because I had the similar experience with meditation. So I've now been meditating for 20 years. And I was terrified of it. 20 years ago, I was so afraid of closing my eyes and being with myself. Like, it was literally terrifying. And today it's my favorite thing, or I have many favorite things. I'm a manifesting generator.
Me too.
And on that note, we should probably share with everyone that Alyse is a 1-3 Sacral Manifesting Generator, cross of the Sphinx. And I love the cross of the Sphinx. My youngest son is a Sphinx. And you guys are super powerful and so important to help people find their way, find a new direction in their life. So it's super exciting to talk to you about all these things. I love that. I love knowing that it's really common that people are afraid of breath work. And I'm actually doing some study at the moment. And one of the courses where I've signed up is breath work. So I'm quite keen to dive in and learn more.
Oh, exciting.
But before we kind of dive into more of what you do today, one thing I love my guests to share is kind of their journey, because we all have that moment, and I love the hero's journey. So we often sort of talk about it through that frame, but we have that rock bottom moment, the dark night of the soul, that's catalytic for us to become who we are today and who we will be in our, even more expanded version of ourselves as we continue on this life path. So Alyse, I'd just love to hear a bit about your journey. Like, what was that catalytic moment? What was the dark night of the soul? Who have you become? What have you done and experienced to become who you are today? And then tell people a little bit about what you do today.
Okay. Yeah. It's a big question. I feel like there was multiple moments for me. The first one I'd like to say was probably at age 19. So it was pretty young for me. I think it was happening my whole life. When I actually look back and I look at my childhood and the different experiences I had of kind of like having these higher levels of awareness around things or seeing things, I would see ghosts and stuff as a kid. Like I was always kind of tuned into something, but I didn't have words for it and I never spoke about it.
Wow.
But then when I was 19, I was in my first year of college and I started really struggling with an eating disorder. And I knew that I needed to find answers as to why this was happening. And I just started like searching. I was just started looking for like, what is going on with me? Because I had a seemingly nice, wonderful childhood, two parents that cared a lot about me, had everything I needed. Like there was nothing, as far as I knew, as far as I could understand at the time, that would have contributed to me feeling this way. So I just started going on this journey of looking for answers. And shortly after that, I discovered yoga and I started working at a yoga studio. And by working at the yoga studio, I just was able, like all of this stuff opened up for me because I would sit there and I'd read all the books they had there. And they also had different classes and workshops there. And one night they were having a breathwork session, like a group breathwork session. And I did it. And I don't know why, because nothing actually really happened that night when I went to that class, but for some reason, I just knew I was supposed to do breath work. And from that point on, I was 19. There's a really great breathwork community here in Philadelphia with two amazing teachers, and they run trainings and teacher trainings and all these different workshops. And I literally did every single thing that they had to offer for the next 4 years. So it was so funny because I was like living this double life because I was like in college, like going to parties, drinking, like living the college life. And then I also was like doing all of this breathwork training and doing all of this spiritual personal growth stuff. So it was really funny. So I got into breath work at a really young age and I really started to like expand my view of reality and understand, why I was experiencing what I was experiencing, understand like the family relationships and how that contributed to what I was feeling, all of my family patterns, so I had a lot of this deeper understanding from a very young age. And then throughout my life, I would teach breath work. I had some private clients, but I never had like the full like wherewithal to jump in and start my own business at that time. So I became a school counselor. And like I had my bachelor's in education, and then I went back and I got my master's in counseling psychology. And both my parents were teachers. So like that path made a lot more sense to me at the time because I didn't have anyone in my life who was an entrepreneur. Like I didn't know how to do that. So I became a school counselor. I was a school counselor for 10 years. And then in 2019, I just started to get this very strong urge that I needed to do something more. I think underneath the whole time, I knew that I could be helping people in a much more profound way than I was. I just didn't know what that was. So in 2019, I kind of had what I would call my second spiritual awakening. And I started like really just going deep into learning more and understanding more about like energy and manifestation. And then I started working with a coach. And after that happened, I immediately realized that I needed to start my own business. And initially I just thought it was going to be around breath work because that's what I did, right? I did breath work.
Yeah.
I started out doing breath work and it immediately just snowballed into all of these other things. And I started to realize that a lot of what I was doing was helping people transmute and shift lifetimes of familial and ancestral trauma. And, using my experience as a school counselor, having these 10 years working with traumatized children, like putting that together with my abilities to help people heal, I just started, creating these programs to help people shift their trauma so that they could step into this more authentic version of themselves. And then I quickly started making money in my business. So then I started teaching people how to make money, and like it just, quickly snowballed. Now I have a certification program where I teach people how to facilitate breath work and energy work and all of my trauma tools. So yeah, in the last 3 years, it's just quickly like shifted and quantum leaped into all of these other things.
Oh my God, I love that. I feel like it's such a familiar story. I'm hearing it so much. Like my big pivotal moment was 2019 as well. Like it was the end of 2018 actually, but and same deal, like everything's just skyrocketed. And I hear this message all the time. And I kind of feel like it's almost like there's a portal for all of us doing this work that's opened up, and it's just like, yep, we need you. So many things that I want to touch on. I love that you do, and I want to talk about this intergenerational trauma. Like, what are these patterns? What are these things? How do they get passed down? Because within the human design community, we might look at this in different ways to someone who's in, classic psychology and that sort of thing. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that. But I want to quickly geek out a little bit on your design. So you have the Gate 47, which is all about intergenerational patterning. And changing the patterns. So I think that that's really freaking cool. Like it's right there.
Oh my God.
Design. Yeah.
I love that. For some reason,
right?
that's making me want to cry.
Yeah. Because it feels true, right? Because that's the beauty of it. It's a resonance. And I love that you taught money, because you also have a channel, which is the 214, and that you earn good money and you have everything that you need from all the things that you do that come naturally, because this is all about calling in all the resources, whether it's money or support or skills or whatever it is. So I love it when I hear these stories and we can just see it in people's design. You also have the channel of the seeker as well, which I think is pretty cool. Like straight off the bat, like at 19, already doing breath work, like that's great. And I appreciate you still had the other career, but to get that early, like I didn't even work that stuff out until I was in my late 30s. And then I had to go and retrain, become a master coach, all those things. But before we dive into the intergenerational stuff, I want to go right back. You can see ghosts. Can you tell me a bit about that? I love this. Very recently, I've got in touch with all of my intuition, and I'm just like, let's talk about that. Those, like as a little person and growing up with these sort of things, tell us a bit about that.
It was hard. And what's really funny is I was never able to talk about it, because I think for most of my life, I was so like tuned into everyone else that I could feel that my parents didn't really have the capacity to hear that from me. Like, I feel like I could sense that would just make them uncomfortable and they wouldn't be able to support me with that. So I didn't share it. And I didn't share it with anyone. And even though my grandmother, who's now passed away, and I do, communicate with her, she had that ability too. But when I was younger, I was scared and I never shared it with anyone. But I used to see like a lot of different imagery all the time. Like there was in my parents' house, they had like a Jack and Jill bathroom. So like there was one door to the hallway and one door to their room. And every time I would walk past the door, like the darkness in the opposite door, I would always see something there.
Wow.
Always.
Oh my God,
and I just thought that, yeah, it was scary. And I was scared of the dark because I would always see things in the dark. And I had a bunch of like out of body experiences too when I was a kid. Like I remember being just somewhere like at a friend's house or something, and I would all of a sudden have this experience where I was like, it was almost like I was looking down on my body and being like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Like, what's going on? Like where I had this awareness that I was like in this body, but I couldn't remember like why or how I got here. So I had these really kind of experiences as a kid that I didn't understand and I didn't know how to explain. And I also was scared to tell anyone. So like now looking back on all of the experiences, I understand more what was happening. And also, when I was a school counselor, I used to be able to tune into people. And, and now I understand that I can access the Akashic records and I'm able to tune into people's energy. But at the time, I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And I used to be able to do things like, I would be able to speak to a parent about their child and tell them like everything they needed to know about the kid. But I never talked to the kid. I just would like tune into their energy and tell them, but I didn't know that that's what I was doing. So I thought I was making it up. And I would be like, oh my gosh, Alyse, you're not doing a good job. Like I would kind of make myself feel bad because I didn't realize what I was doing. Yeah. So it's like now that I have this understanding of my abilities and what I'm meant to do and what I'm able to tune into, now looking back on all these experiences in my life, they all make sense to me. But at the time, I had no idea what was going on.
Oh my God, I love it. And it's such a classic manifesting generator story. That's what we do. We think we're bumping around the planet doing a bunch of different things that aren't linked. And then we look back and go, oh my God, everything is perfectly aligned. So I love hearing that story. I also love the line 3, lots of experiences and creating wisdom from that, which is so beautiful. So let's talk about intergenerational trauma patterns. Let's start at ground zero. How do these patterns, I'm going in 2 directions here. A typical manifesting generator. I want to know, how do they get in our way? How are these unconscious patterns playing out that are getting in our way? And number 2, how do we get them? I know the old school belief, and old school is not that long ago now, is that everything is a learnt behavior. However, especially through the frame of human design and the gene keys, we're like, no, this is in our DNA. It's being passed down at, an even deeper level. So I'd really love, how's it getting in our way and how's it being passed down? Great place to start, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So how's it getting in our way is, right now we're at a time on the planet where we are shifting the way we're looking at reality, right? We're shifting into a higher level of consciousness where we're able to see things from a wider perspective, right? But, our parents' generation, the generation before that, they were programmed into a lot of this thinking that is around what our limitations are, scarcity, fear, all of these different things, beliefs around money, around what we're capable of, all of these things are kind of programmed into them and then us, right? So the way it could be getting in our way is, for example, when you're starting a business, right? I know for me, just to speak from my own experience, one of the things I came up against was feeling like I'm going to fail. As soon as I started my business, I automatically kept having this reoccurring fear. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail. And when I really started to peel back the layers on that was an intergenerational trauma, right? I was able to kind of peel back the layers and understand that was coming a lot from my dad's ancestral line and his father and his father and his father. And I was kind of able to see that wasn't even my belief, because on some level, I knew that I came here to do this, right? I knew I was meant to do this. So it's why does this keep coming up for me? Why am I so afraid that I'm going to fail? So I was able to see wow, this is something that I'm carrying. And then I can slowly, disentangle myself from that. And then also when it comes up, to have that understanding that that's not actually your belief and that's not actually true or real for you, makes it so much easier to say okay, I'm now going to choose out of that, versus thinking that that's actually something you have to believe or think could be a possibility for you. Right. So that's just one quick example of how it could get in your way. Also, money is a really big one, because whether we realize it or not, we really do take on a lot of what our parents thought about money or their feelings towards money, right? And it doesn't even have to be something that we even hear them say or witness. It's just a level of consciousness, right? Especially with our mom, we're literally being created and formed in her body from her cells. So whatever feelings or energy she has towards anything, we will take that on. We take on her consciousness until we decide not to, right? Until we start to live our life and decide that we're going to do things differently. We're going to look at things differently. But that's kind of, programmed into us from birth. And that's not to say it's like a doomsday thing, but it's just like that would be like the default method. You know what I mean? Like that would be what we default to. And I notice even for me, like sometimes, even though I've done, I've come so far and I've created so many different new ways of doing things for myself, sometimes in a moment of like, shock or fear, I'm going right back to like, oh my gosh, I don't have enough money for that or something, when that's not even the case anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you just kind of go back to that default setting, So that's some of the ways that it can get in our way. And even if we want to think like, okay, I'm going to choose out of this, I'm going to do something different, if that is not happening, then you can kind of know that there's something we need to look at here. There's something that you're not seeing that might be stopping you from getting to that next level. And that's the kind of work that I love to do with people, is just kind of looking at, okay, if you're here and you're wanting to get to this next income level and it's not happening, what is that thing that's standing in your way between where you're at and where you want to be? And usually it's just another level of some kind of limiting belief from childhood, or some kind of programming that you're still kind of buying into or playing out, that just needs to be dismantled on an even deeper level so that you feel safe and free to step into the next level.
I love that. And just a quick human design geek moment. You actually have a gate. So in the spleen, each gate has a fear, and it's just a shadow expression, right? So like you said, it's not like a doomsday thing at all. It's just like these fears sit in these gates, and then we can choose to embody the higher expressions. And you actually have the gate 32, and the fear that sits in there is the fear of failure, and you have it 3 times in your chart. So big lesson, like, so this, your soul has come into this world to go like, this is an intergenerational pattern that I'm stopping. Like, this is ending with me. Like, that's the way it kind of comes through for me. Does that resonate with you?
Oh my gosh, totally. And I also see that with a lot of other people, not necessarily with the fear of failure, but these things that they've really come in to shift in this lifetime. Like, it's very clear, if I tune into their Akashic records. So I think so many of us have come in to end these cycles and these patterns in this lifetime. And then also, just to answer your question about how are they passed down?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's energetic, and I do think it's in the DNA, but I mean, I guess I kind of explain that, when you just think about the way we develop in the womb of our mother and how our cells are literally made up of her cells. The cells are essentially energy, which is consciousness, which is, carrying this coding of who we are, who we think we are, how we identify, and how we feel about the world. So, a lot of the work that I do with people too is just this identity shift, right? Because there's so many things that we're kind of identifying as that we're not even realizing.
So
and part
true.
of that is just like what we took on, so if you, and I'll tell people these funny things, like, to kind of help them shift their identity. Like, I'm the person who now, like, pays this much money a month for my gym, because that's something that was out of the realm of possibility before, or I am the person that has this car now, it's like these little things that you can anchor in. And not to say it always has to be material, but just to like give your brain that shift of like, this is who I am now. Because sometimes we can still identify as that version of you that, is more like your mother, or wouldn't do that certain thing, or couldn't have that thing. So it's really about shifting your identity of who you think you are.
So true. We talk a lot about identity here, and it's really fascinating. I love this because I'm also a line 3. So I'm constantly looking at the experiences that I've had, like how I resonate to what you're saying. And one of the intergenerational things that has been mind-blowing for me and my family is that after my father's death, I discovered and confirmed that both my father and my grandfather were both psychic, and they both had all of these energies and these things, and they just shut them down, because not only was it, not the thing that you did, but it's certainly not the thing that men did.
Right.
And it's been fascinating, just because it's not like my dad ever spoke about it, but he just used to he'd tell these brilliant stories about how his godmother was a clairvoyant to the royal family, and he would go with her all over the UK to, exercise ghosts and do all of these crazy things. And I still love his stories. And it wasn't until I was going on my own intuitive journey that I was like, oh my God, it was all there, plain as day. And the closest relationship I actually had was to my grandfather, but sadly he died when I was 3. So, and I had this moment where I was standing in the hospital just before we discovered that he'd passed. And for years, like I'm talking up until about 3, maybe 4 years ago, I remember feeling this confusion in that moment. And I thought the confusion was like, no, but he can't be dead. But actually, more recently, I went back to that moment and I'm like, the confusion was because he's standing just there. He's not dead. He's right there. And I feel like we're having all of these moments all the time, especially as kids. We don't know what to do with it. So that does affect these our identity and who we think we are and who we should be. And I just love all of this work because it's really helping people open up to, well, maybe I'm not making it up. Like you said earlier, maybe I'm not making it up. Maybe I can really feel these things.
Oh, absolutely. And also, like, just to your point about your grandfather and father not, you never knowing that. I think one of the other things we're shifting into now is just allowing it to feel safe to claim that you have these gifts and abilities. Because for so long, in probably their generation, it just would have been, oh, that's weird. But in generations before that, it actually would have been dangerous, to share that. And I think that's one of the things that I see so many women coming up against when it comes to putting themselves out there and just claiming and owning that they have these gifts and abilities is on some deep, ancestral past life kind of level. It doesn't feel safe. They feel like something could happen to them, or they'll be ridiculed or ostracized or killed or whatever it is. So now it's like really feeling that level of safety to just say, like, this is who I am and this is what I can do. And I see pretty much almost every single woman I work with come up against that at some point.
Yeah. Wow. I remember having this moment talking to an empath friend of mine. And I tell the first part of this story often when I'm literally saying to him, this is a long time ago now, I'm like, so what is an empath? Can you explain it to me? And he's explaining, what he experiences and stuff. And I said, oh, so it's like when you're walking down the street and you walk past someone and you can just feel what's going on for them. And I remember him just looking at me going, no, I don't do that, Emma. But that's definitely an empath. And I'm like, oh, doesn't everyone do that? I just thought that was normal, And I remember him saying in that same conversation, like, he said something like, you're definitely in a past life, you're a witch. And I have like these weird, like I'm a very strong swimmer. I love the water. I'm a Piscean. I love it. But I also have these really weird, like, I can't look at anything drowning. I can't like anything to do with drowning just freaks me out. So I wonder, like, do you think that is potentially something past life, those sort of things?
Most likely. Yeah. And it might be just from being drowned or being killed. And I always have this memory of like, and this is so weird because this obviously never happened in my life, but I have this weird vision of like these like really big boulders being placed on top of me, like on top of my chest. And yeah. And like, I'm like, where? That obviously never happened to me in real life, but definitely could have happened to me in a past life. And I feel like I always have weird past life memories because I'll just have these visions of things where I'm like, I know that never happened to me. And then sometimes I'll be like, oh, maybe I saw it in a movie or whatever. But it's just like these very specific things where I'm like, where would I be coming up with that? And then I had this one period of time where I feel like I was processing all of this ancestral and past life trauma around the Holocaust, because I'm Jewish, and I would get these visions of like concentration camps and people, and like I was like, where are these coming from? And I did a lot of work with a healer to kind of process that, but it was just so weird because I didn't know where they were coming from. It's not like I had looked at anything or watched a movie or anything. Like, in fact, I can't even watch movies about the Holocaust.
No.
So it was crazy how they were just like flashing in my mind. It was just this one point where I think I was just processing it.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think this is so fascinating.
Yeah.
In my membership community, we just ran a online retreat. It was amazing. It was so cool. One of the guests that we had, or two of the guests that we had, were these guys from a business called FLFE, and they're all about consciousness, and they're really talking about the science of consciousness, how it works, thoughts, everything. And just hearing the way that they actually talk about, like, a lot of the thoughts that we have aren't ours. Like, they really are not ours. They're just not ours. They're just sitting out here in the greater consciousness, and we're picking them up. And like you saying that, and because you have that heritage, like maybe you did live through some of the worst traumas ever. And maybe it's just because this soul's come into this life to really understand what it's like to live as a Jewish person. So it's like got access to all of these other things. And it's funny because as humans, we make that scary and right and wrong and all of those things. And it just makes it so much worse than
yes.
I mean, it's already bad. Let me be clear.
Right.
So how do you handle that? Like, how do you deal with, when you say you processed it and you worked through it, like how did you, because if it was me, again, I'm putting myself in those shoes. Like, I would be like, God, did things happen to me as a kid that I just don't remember? Like, how do you come to terms with all of those visions and those memories?
Yeah. So I think it was multiple things for me, and it depends on where I'm at in my life too. But for that time specifically, I think I was working with a healer that helped me kind of process through a lot of it. Like we did like a visualization thing and like a healing thing and all of that. And that was really helpful. But just in general, when it comes to like accessing all of the thoughts that are just there, I know for me, I live in a big city. I live right in the city. I could be walking my dog and all of a sudden I'm feeling something, I'm thinking something affects me. A car with really loud music drives by and I'm like suddenly like all affected by it, So I think clearing your own energy and doing energy work on yourself. I literally am doing energy work on myself like almost all day.
Yeah.
like
right.
just nonstop, like clearing my energy field, grounding myself, connecting with my guides, like putting a bubble of protection around myself. I do that nonstop. And I really feel like that's honestly the best way to do energy work, because it's kind of like this thing that you're constantly practicing, like fortifying your field, creating your boundaries, and really practicing not taking on other people's energy or other things that aren't yours. And especially with like the work that I do, I'm constantly helping people clear. I'm constantly helping people process. And then it's like, I have my husband, I have my 2 kids, I live in the city. Like, I'm just like constantly like doing all of these things to help clear my energy and just really fortify my own space so that I feel comfortable and safe within my own space.
Oh, I love that. And I so resonate with that. I had a client yesterday that we were talking about this, and I'm like, boundaries. Like I think one of the biggest challenges when we are in the coaching, healing, spiritual world is that we feel like we have to help everybody. And really, in many cases, what we're doing is we're saying, well, we're not worthy of boundaries, and we're not deserving of this and that sort of thing. Because and oftentimes the people that are of the lower consciousness, like, they're not going to change. No matter what you do, they're not going to change until they choose to change. And you can't force that. They'll have a moment. I know I had a moment. I had 7 years of being on my knees and depression and all of these other things. But and I just think it's so important that we understand that clearing our energy and our space. I had to move out of the city. I couldn't do it anymore. Like, we lived in Sydney. And every time I walked out of my house, I just felt like I couldn't be me, and I shut down, and I was like, oh, it was just too much. I just felt so uncomfortable. But yeah, I love all of that. So the next, obviously, I want to talk about breath work. So how specifically does breath work help us shift these intergenerational patterns and trauma and get us more aligned to our truth and our heart?
Yes, great question. I love talking about this. So, excuse me. So the way I like to describe what's happening with breath work is essentially two things are happening. One is when we do the breath, so when we're consciously focusing on our breathing, we are thrusting ourselves into the present moment, right? You have to be in the present moment when you're breathing, because you can't take a breath in the past and you can't take a breath in the future. So you have to be in the present moment. And the present moment is essentially the quantum field, the field of infinite possibility. So the more that you're connecting in with the field of infinite possibility, the more that infinite possibilities are available to you. So all of a sudden, you expand your vision of what's possible, right? And you start to see things that are available to you that you might not have been aware of before. So all of a sudden, you're expanding what you think you can do, what you're capable of. So there's that piece of it. And then also, when we use the breath, we're moving energy. We're moving energy in the body. So why is that important? Because as human beings, we are emotional beings that were never taught how to deal with our emotions. We were taught that our emotions are inconvenient and uncomfortable, and we should suppress them and hide them and not deal with them. So everybody is walking around with a ton of suppressed emotional energy that just needs to be felt and moved through and cleared, right? And the way that you clear it is just by feeling it. So what happens when you use the breath is you give yourself a chance to feel the emotional energy that's present for you and shift it. So as that energy starts to shift, all of a sudden, you don't feel as much anxiety, you don't feel as much stress, you feel clearer, and you can actually start living from a place of presence instead of living in reaction to the past. And the other thing that happens when we use the breath is we kind of go into this altered state where we have access to the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is where all of those beliefs exist that we're not aware of, that are like driving the bus, right? So like I mentioned before, the limiting beliefs around money, right? And if you can't get to that next income level, well, most likely there's some limiting belief in there that's driving the bus that you're not aware of. So when we use the breath, we have access to those subconscious beliefs. So all of a sudden you might have an awareness of like a memory of, oh, wow, I witnessed my mom and my dad saying this to each other about money. And I internalized that as the truth about the world. And I've been projecting that onto my reality ever since. So now that you have that awareness, you can choose out of it, right? So you gain these different awarenesses about the way that you're playing out your reality that you haven't been aware of before. So, there's multiple things happening because you're moving energy. So the stuck energy in your body in the form of emotional energy, in the form of old belief systems, in the form of lower frequency energies are all moving out of the body. So now you have more space to be a clearer channel for what is meant for you, right? So I always say that when people start to use breath work and they start to transmute and move through their trauma, they become really clear channels and manifestation becomes really easy because the energy can just move really easily through you instead of it having to skirt around all of these different blocks and belief systems and versions of reality that you think are true. Now you just kind of become this clearer channel. So people will start to notice that the manifestation becomes easier. And also their psychic abilities come online, and I think that's what we're seeing with so many people. I know for me, like I'll have people come to me for different reasons, right? Some people really want to move through trauma. Some people want to build their business. Some people want to activate their psychic abilities. But when we do this work, it all kind of starts to happen because when you transmute the trauma, your psychic abilities come online. And like conversely, if you're wanting to open up your psychic abilities, you're going to come up against your trauma and you're going to have to clear it, right? So it all kind of happens together.
Oh my God, I love that. I think it's so powerful. And the one experience that I have had with a practitioner, it was exactly that, I don't know where the tears came from, the emotion came from, it just released. It was amazing. And I just felt like, even just listening to you speak half took me back there. Like I just felt stoned after it. Like, I'm so chilled out. This is great. Like I loved it. So how can people use, like, is there something that you could even teach us right now that's simple, something that's going to help us clear our energy, maybe clear our channel, maybe not necessarily the deep trauma work that you do, but is there something that you can teach us right now that can help us get into the present moment with breath work?
I would say the best place to start would probably be, I have a breathwork session that I send out when you sign up for my email list. That's probably the best place to start. And I can just tell you a little bit about it so that way you can be familiar with it. And then you can try that and see if it resonates for you. Because the breath that I teach is a little bit different. I know a lot of people are used to like the more intense breathing, like the Wim Hof or like the 3-part breath. The breath that I teach is called conscious connected breathing. And I kind of do it in my own way where I talk you through and I'm kind of channeling like the higher realms as I'm talking you through it. So it's like this, very, I wouldn't say it's very peaceful, but it's also like you feel very connected to yourself and to everything. So it's a very simple breath. It's just in and out through the mouth with no space between the inhale and the exhale. So it's just a circle in and out through the mouth, in and out through the mouth. And the purpose of it is to just move energy, right? That's the intention, is you're just moving energy in the body and you're kind of dropping into your body's own natural rhythm. Because if you drop into that, the body knows. The body has an intelligence and it knows what needs to be cleared at that moment. It knows what you're ready to face. It knows what you're ready to clear. So if you just drop into this rhythm with your breath and trust the body, the exact right thing will happen. That's why I always tell people you can't do it wrong. As long as you lay down with the intention of breathing, the exact perfect thing will happen. I have a lot of like high achieving women who come to me who are perfectionists and who are really successful. And they're like, nothing happened. I don't think I did it right. I think I did it wrong. And I'm like, no. You did it exactly right. This is exactly what was supposed to happen. Even if you think you fell asleep the whole time, right? Things are happening. So I think it's important to just understand that.
I love that.
Yeah. And when you can try the one that I send out, and I have a video where I show you how to do it. And then I have an audio where I'm talking you through the breath work. So that would be a great place to start, just so you can see if it's something that resonates for you.
I love that. And it's so similar. I work with so many high achievers and perfectionists. And one of my favorite statements, and it always gets reflected back to me, and I love it, is you can't fuck it up. Like, you cannot fuck it up. So just do it, just do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's one little story that I want to share with you, and then I'm going to let you go, or at least let you share how people can get in contact and get that email. I was walking with my husband the other night, and he was sharing a story about how, and he nearly said it to our youngest son. And I'm like, if this isn't a good thing, I don't want you putting it in his head. Don't say it. So luckily he didn't. But he said, as a kid, and I used to have this same fear, as a kid, the moment he became conscious of his breath, he thought, oh my God, I have to breathe. And then once he was consciously breathing, he was like, oh my God, what if I stop breathing? If I stop thinking about breathing and I just stop breathing? And he used to tell his brother, whatever you do, don't stop thinking about breathing. And I just think like, that was so me, like I've actually gone through this, my life going, as soon as I become conscious of my breath and probably up until the last few years, it hasn't been so significant, or it hasn't been a thing. But there is this part of me that almost freaks out becoming aware of my breathing. And, or if you're in meditation and they say, you know, just let the body breathe you or something like that. I'm like, how do you do that? You know, like,
yeah.
So before I let you go, before you share all your details, is there anything that can really help us drop into that present space with breath work? Like, there's a lot of thinkers listening to this. How do we get out of our head and into our body to really be present with the breath work?
That's a really great question. I think like it's something that you just kind of have to allow to happen instead of trying to figure it out or think about it. That's why I say to like focus on the inhale and the exhale. And as you do that, your body will naturally drop into that. And that's kind of the intention with, you know, me kind of talking you through it, because I'm kind of talking you into the space where you feel safe and comfortable to drop into your body. And once you do that, it'll just happen. But all you have to do is start and breathe and then trust that the exact right thing is going to happen, because it's not, you know, it's not something that you can figure out or something that you can, that I can tell you how to do right now. Cause it's just something that like happens. And it's something that it's funny. Cause I know for me, I'll all of a sudden, you know, come out of it and be like, oh, and you don't even remember the point at which that did happen, you know, but it just happens where, you know, your consciousness and your body's intelligence just kind of takes over, and whatever happens needs to happen. And you're just kind of tapped into and tuned into this higher consciousness that knows exactly what to do. So it's just like this point where your ego, your thinking brain just kind of surrenders, and you can kind of just drop into this natural rhythm of what's meant to happen.
Oh, I love all of that. You know, I used to say this thing all the time, move from how to allow. And I feel like that's so it.
Yes.
So Alison, where can people find you? How can people access this email and everything else?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Alyse_Breathes. And then also my website, AlyseBreathes.com. I also have a podcast, which I know you're going to be a guest on at some point soon, called Reclaiming Consciousness. That's a great place to connect with me. You can find me there. And on my website or through my Instagram, you can sign up for my email list to get that breathwork session. You actually get a breathwork session, a meditation, and journaling prompts that all go together to support you. And you can kind of see a sampling of the tools that I provide.
Oh my God, that sounds exciting. I'm going to go join it. Going to go and sign up and have a crack myself.
Awesome.
Alyse, thank you so much for joining me. It's been super fun talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for being here and sharing this journey with us today. We've had so much fun, and I so look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now. Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast, or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means, get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.